The Hollywood image of piracy is a canvas of roaring cannons, clashing cutlasses, and the perpetual glory of battle against the Royal Navy. But if you were to stand on the main deck of the Queen Anne's Revenge in May of 1718, during the final 3 grueling days before the ship met its ultimate fate, you would not hear the sound of cannon fire. You would hear the relentless, agonizing creak of rotting timber, the rhythmic wheeze of the bilge pumps, and the desperate coughing of dying men. The greatest battle Blackbeard and his crew faced was never against the British crown. Their true enemy was entirely invisible. It was the crushing weight of isolation, the inescapable decay of their own supplies, and a silent war for daily survival on a floating wooden prison. To understand how Edward Teach commanded the Caribbean, you must look past the smoke of black powder and step down into the suffocating darkness of the lower decks, where the real war was being fought every single hour. The most immediate threat to any pirate crew was not a broadside volley from a warship, but the very water they carried in their hold. During those final 3 days, anchored under the blistering tropical sun off the coast of the Carolinas, the internal temperature of the ship routinely exceeded 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Below deck, stored in massive wooden casks, the fresh water supply was dying. After weeks at sea, stagnant water blooms with green algae and breeds dysentery, taking on the smell of rotten eggs and sulfur. To survive, the quartermaster employed a calculated chemical solution. Pirates did not drink rum purely for recreation or drunken debauchery. They used it as a critical antiseptic. By mixing the foul, stale water with strong rum or beer, they killed the bacteria just enough to make the liquid swallowable, creating the early precursor to grog. A pirate taking his daily ration would hold his breath, tilt the wooden cup, and swallow the thick, warm liquid quickly. Drink the water straight, and you die of the flux in agony. Drink nothing, and you die of dehydration in 3 days. This delicate daily chemistry kept the men standing, allowing them to outlast merchant vessels that lacked the ruthless discipline of pirate rationing. But even the best rationing could not stop what was happening to their food. And what they were forced to eat in those final days would break the mind of any modern sailor. But there is a specific reason why this horrific diet was their greatest tactical advantage. The pirate diet was a masterclass in extreme preservation and psychological endurance. Fresh meat spoiled within 48 hours in the oppressive Caribbean humidity. Instead, the crew of the Queen Anne's Revenge survived on salted beef and pork, preserved in heavy barrels of dense brine. After months at sea, this meat became as hard as mahogany wood and was crusted in thick, crystalline salt. Before boiling it in the ship's heavy copper galley pot, the cook had to tie the meat to a rope and tow it behind the ship in the ocean to let the seawater wash away the excess salt, a process that sometimes attracted aggressive sharks to the hull. Alongside the meat was hardtack, a dense, flavorless biscuit made of flour and water, baked multiple times until all moisture was gone to prevent mold. But it did not prevent insects. In the dim, flickering lantern light of the mess deck, a sailor would repeatedly tap his hardtack against the wooden table. Tap, tap, tap. They did this to knock out the black weevils and pale maggots burrowing inside the biscuit. You ate in the dark, the veteran sailors used to say, so you would not see exactly what you were swallowing. This brutal diet was not a failure of logistics. It was a triumph of survival. By mastering the art of eating the inedible, Blackbeard could keep his ship at sea for months without making port, effectively disappearing from the map and striking without warning. Yet, a full stomach means absolutely nothing if the ship sinks beneath your feet. A 17th century pirate ship was an organic, dying creature that required constant, agonizing surgery. The Queen Anne's Revenge was a massive French vessel before Blackbeard captured her, built of heavy oak, but the warm Caribbean waters were filled with teredo worms. These microscopic marine mollusks bored silently into the wooden hull beneath the waterline, turning solid, impenetrable oak into a fragile, rotting honeycomb. During these 3 days, the ship was taking on water faster than usual. The solution was the relentless back-breaking labor of the bilge pumps. Men worked in grueling shifts, their hands covered in raw, bleeding blisters, pumping thousands of gallons of foul black water back into the sea. "Keep the pumps moving, or we all drink the ocean tonight," the boatswain would bark, his voice hoarse from the salt air and exhaustion. To patch the leaks from the inside, the ship's carpenter melted pitch and oakum, a thick mixture of pine tar and unraveled hemp rope fibers. The smell of boiling tar mixed with the stench of unwashed bodies and rotting seaweed in the claustrophobic lower decks. They hammered this sticky, burning mass into the seams of the hull while standing waist-deep in dark, freezing water. This desperate maintenance was the hidden cost of freedom. A pirate ship could not simply pull into a royal shipyard for repairs. They had to rely on their own crude carpentry, operating as a self-sustaining floating city. But no amount of boiling tar could patch the catastrophic damage happening to the human bodies on board. An enemy far more terrifying than a sinking ship was already walking among the crew, dismantling them piece by piece. Disease was the ultimate apex predator of the golden age of piracy, and scurvy was its most gruesome and efficient weapon. A severe deficiency of vitamin C caused the human body to literally stop maintaining its own cellular structure. Deep in the suffocating belly of the Queen Anne's Revenge, surrounded by the smell of vomit and decay, men lay in canvas hammocks, watching their own bodies dissolve. Scurvy starts with profound, paralyzing exhaustion, followed by the gums turning spongy and black, causing healthy teeth to simply fall out into a man's hand. But the true horror of the disease is what it does to collagen. Old wounds that had healed years ago, old sword cuts or musket ball entries, would suddenly split open and begin to bleed again as the scar tissue degraded. Even broken bones that had set and healed would unknit themselves, leaving grown men screaming in agony as their skeletons failed them. The ship's surgeon, a man often kidnapped from captured vessels precisely for his medical knowledge, fought a losing battle. He had no fresh citrus. He used what primitive tools he had, applying dangerous sulfuric acid to rotting gums or prescribing drops of elixir of vitriol. This medical nightmare is the exact reason why Blackbeard had just spent days blockading the port of Charleston, holding the entire city hostage not for gold, not for silver, but for a simple wooden chest of medicines. He knew that without medical supplies, his fearsome crew of 300 hardened veterans would be reduced to a paralyzed, dying hospital ward within weeks. Medicine was infinitely more valuable than Spanish silver. But even with the medicine secured, the psychological pressure of living in a floating hospital was pushing the crew toward the most dangerous tipping point any captain can face. Put 300 heavily armed, diseased and exhausted criminals in a wooden box measuring barely 100 feet long, and violence is a mathematical certainty. The only thing keeping the Queen Anne's Revenge from descending into a complete bloodbath was the pirate code. Contrary to the modern myth of lawless anarchy, a pirate ship was a strictly functioning, hyper-democratic machine. The captain had absolute authority only during the chaos of battle. In the quiet, desperate days of survival, the quartermaster ruled the deck. He was elected by the men. He distributed the salted meat. He measured the water rations to the exact ounce. He settled disputes and maintained order. If a man stole from the communal stores or hid fresh water for himself, the punishment was not a dramatic walk off a plank. That is a Hollywood invention. The real punishment was being tied to the mast and whipped with the cat o' nine tails, or worse, being marooned on an empty sandbar with a single pistol, one shot, and a bottle of water, left to die of exposure or take his own life. The tension during these 3 days was palpable and thick. The men were hungry, the ship was failing, and whispers of a mutiny spread like the plague itself through the lower decks. Blackbeard knew the breaking point of his men. He knew that an idle, suffering crew would eventually turn their flintlocks on him. He had to make a calculated, ruthless decision to shed weight, reduce the crew size, and consolidate his power. This psychological mastery, this ability to read the dangerous, shifting moods of a starving crew, was his greatest weapon, far deadlier than the slow match burning in his beard. Adding to the unbearable internal pressure was the constant, exhausting vigilance against the weather. The Caribbean is beautiful, but notoriously treacherous. A sudden squall could tear the heavy wooden masts from the deck in minutes, leaving the ship crippled and dead in the water. When the sky turned the color of bruised iron and the wind suddenly dropped to a dead, terrifying calm, the crew knew a violent storm was coming. Men scrambled up the complex web of rigging, their bare, calloused feet gripping tarred ropes 90 feet in the air, wrestling with heavy canvas sails that felt like wet concrete in the driving rain. One slip on the slick wood meant a fatal fall to the deck below, or being swallowed forever by the black, churning ocean. The sheer physical exhaustion of fighting the sea, combined with the hunger and the lingering disease, created a perfect storm of human desperation. It was under this immense, crushing pressure that the Queen Anne's Revenge finally approached Beaufort Inlet. The official historical record states that the ship accidentally ran aground on a hidden sandbar, a tragic navigational error that ended the reign of the great flagship. But those who survived the 3 preceding days of starvation, disease, and mounting tension knew better. They knew it was a deliberate, tactical sacrifice. Modern historians heavily suspect that Blackbeard intentionally grounded his own dying ship to legally abandon the weaker, sicklier members of his bloated crew, taking only the most loyal men and the best plunder onto a smaller, faster sloop. He used the mechanical failure of the ship as a surgical tool to ensure his own survival and escape a mutiny. The real story of the golden age of piracy is not found in the romanticized, cinematic clashes of swords or the magical discovery of buried treasure chests. It is found in the brutal, brilliant engineering of daily human survival. It is found in the chemical balancing of strong rum and stagnant water, the relentless pounding of burning oakum into rotting hulls, and the psychological warfare required to govern hundreds of desperate armed men. When Edward Teach finally met his end in a bloody, close-quarters battle months later, he was not just a pirate captain. He was a master survivor of 100 invisible wars fought in the dark, sweltering belly of a wooden ship. The myth of the pirate endures today because we love the idea of absolute, uncompromised freedom. But the historical reality teaches us that their freedom was purchased with an unimaginable tolerance for suffering, iron discipline, and relentless endurance. They were masters of the sea, not because they were fearless in battle against the British Navy, but because they knew exactly how to stay alive when everything in the ocean, including their own ship, was trying to kill them. This was the true genius of the pirate golden age. What invisible aspect of pirate life should we explore next? Would you like to know how surgeons amputated shattered limbs during a rolling storm, or how navigators crossed the Caribbean blind without modern instruments? Let me know in the comments below.